The Galactic Council chamber resembled a massive amphitheater, carved from living crystal, its translucent walls refracting starlight in dazzling patterns across the assembled delegates. Dr. Aiden Chen watched from the human delegation's platform as High Councillor xenoarchaeologist of the Meridian Collective adjusted his chromatophores to display what passed for amusement among his species. The humans, xenoarchaeologist's translator projected his thoughts with the faintest hint of derision, once again petitioned for access to the Advanced Sciences Division. They believe there was a pause as the translator searched for the right word. Nuclear fusion reactors qualify them for Tier 2 civilization status. A ripple of color-based laughter cascaded through the chamber as various species expressed their mirth in their own unique ways. The Valxian delegation's bioluminescent crests pulsed in synchronized mockery, while the crystalline Zith representatives vibrated at frequencies that produced what humans would recognize as chuckling. Aiden maintained his professional composure, though his knuckles whitened as he gripped the railings of the platform. After 15 years as Earth's leading xenoarchaeologist, he'd grown accustomed to the Council's condescension. Still, it never got easier watching humanity's achievements being dismissed, like a child's crayon drawings proudly displayed on a refrigerator. Perhaps, croaked Ambassador Thrix of the Silicon Mines, her crystalline form sparkling, we should explain to our primitive friends that pushing atoms together in a magnetic bottle barely qualifies as advanced technology. My species mastered quantum vacuum manipulation before your ancestors learned to walk upright. More chromatic laughter. Aiden felt a gentle touch on his arm, Ambassador Wong, Earth's chief diplomat, signaling him to maintain his cool. They'd prepared for this. The Council's mockery was as predictable as orbital mechanics. Respected members of the Council, Wong's voice carried clearly through the chamber's acoustic enhancement field, we understand your position. However, we believe our recent discoveries on XO 3379 may interest you. That got their attention. XO 3379 was officially a restricted world, its surface dotted with ruins that predated even the oldest Council races. The mere mention of human activity there sent a wave of agitated colors through the assembled delegates. High Councillor xenoarchaeologist's chromatophores shifted to warning patterns. You dare violate Council restrictions? Not at all, Wong replied smoothly. We maintained the required distance. Our long-range scanners simply detected some anomalies that Dr. Chen would like to present. This was Aiden's cue. He stepped forward, activating his holoprojector. The chamber darkened as images of XO 3379's surface filled the space above the delegates. Honorable Council members, our survey ships detected unusual energy signatures emanating from the northern continent's ruins. The patterns match no known civilization's technology, including those of the Council races. Impossible, hissed Representative Catil of the Quantum Collective, their probability clouds swirling in agitation. Our sensors have monitored XO 3379 for millennia. There is nothing new to discover there. Aiden allowed himself a small smile. With all due respect, Representative, perhaps you weren't looking with the right eyes. Human pattern recognition algorithms identified these signatures because they resemble certain theoretical models we've been developing. Models that your species dismissed as, what was the term? Ah yes, primitive approximations. The chamber erupted in a chaos of colors and sounds as delegates argued in their native tongues. High Councillor xenoarchaeologist had to pulse his chromatophores in the universal pattern for order several times before quiet returned. You test our patience, humans, xenoarchaeologist warned. What exactly are you claiming to have found? Nothing yet, Aiden replied carefully. We're simply requesting permission to conduct a proper archaeological survey, under Council supervision, of course, unless you're concerned about what we might discover. The challenge in his voice was subtle but clear. The Council races prided themselves on their scientific enlightenment. Denying a legitimate research request would contradict everything they claimed to stand for. xenoarchaeologist's chromatophores cycled through a complex pattern that Aiden's translator couldn't quite capture. Finally, the High Councillor spoke. The Council will consider your request. Return to your world. We will summon you when we reach a decision. As the human delegation prepared to leave, Aiden caught snippets of conversation from the other platforms. The Valxians were particularly agitated. their bioluminescence flickering in patterns that suggested worry rather than their earlier mockery. Good, Aiden thought, let them worry, because what he hadn't told the council was that he already knew exactly what lay buried in those ruins. And when the truth came out, their carefully constructed hierarchy of species superiority would never be the same. 3 months after the council meeting, Aiden stood at the edge of a massive excavation site on XO 3379, watching as his team's digmechs carefully cleared debris from what appeared to be an ancient archive. The alien supervisors hovered nearby in their environmental suits, their disapproval evident even through their protective gear. "Your methods are crude," observed Catil's junior representative, Lamont, their probability cloud condensing with distaste as another precision laser cut through millennia of accumulated sediment. "You risk destroying priceless artifacts." Aiden didn't bother looking up from his scanner readings. "Funny, I don't see your teams making any progress with their sophisticated approaches. How long have you been studying these ruins? 1,000 years? 2? The quantum being's cloud rippled in what might have been embarrassment. They all knew the council races had made virtually no progress in understanding these ruins despite centuries of study. Their sophisticated methods mainly involved scanning from orbit and endless theoretical debates. "Dr. Chen," called out Dr. Reynolds, one of his team's junior archaeologists. "We've got something." Aiden hurried over, conscious of the alien observers trailing behind him like anxious parents watching their children handle expensive toys. The digmech had exposed what looked like a sealed chamber, its walls covered in unfamiliar scripts that seemed to shift and change as they watched. "Fascinating," murmured Professor Zhang, their linguistics expert. "The symbols appear to be responding to our presence. Some kind of psycho-reactive material." Le Monde drifted closer, their cloud extending sensory tendrils. "Impossible. Such technology would predate even the quantum collective's emergence." "And yet," Aiden replied dryly, "here it is." He checked the structural integrity readings before making a decision. "Reynolds, prep the entry protocols. Zhang, start recording. Let's see what's behind door number 1. The digmech's precision fields carefully cut through the ancient seal. As the door swung open, lights automatically flickered to life inside, another impossibility that sent the alien observers into a frenzy of agitated discussion. The chamber beyond was small but perfectly preserved, its walls lined with crystalline storage devices that pulsed with an inner light. "By the probability matrices," Lamont whispered, their cloud practically vibrating with excitement. "These are pristine data crystals. Do you understand what this means?" "That your people have been looking in the wrong places for centuries," Aiden suggested, earning himself a sharp look from Professor Zhang. He knew he should be more diplomatic, but after years of condescension, he couldn't help enjoying their discomfort. The team worked methodically to document and extract the crystals. Each one seemed to respond differently to their presence, some glowing brighter, others dimming or changing colors. The alien observers hovered anxiously, their various sensory organs working overtime to record every detail. It was Professor Zhang who made the first breakthrough. "Dr. Chen, these patterns, they're not random. The crystals are responding to our brainwave patterns. They're trying to communicate." Aiden rushed to her station, where she had connected one of the crystals to their translation matrix. The holographic display showed cascading symbols that gradually began arranging themselves into recognizable patterns. "That's impossible," declared one of the Valxian observers, their bioluminescent patterns showing clear distress. "The crystals have never responded to any known species." Maybe," Aiden replied, watching as more patterns emerged. "You never gave them the right input." He turned to Zhang. "What are we looking at?" The professor's fingers flew over her controls, eyes wide with excitement. "It's like they were waiting for the right key. Our brainwave patterns seem to match something in their base programming. The initial translations suggest these are some kind of historical records." Le Monde's cloud contracted sharply. "You cannot possibly decrypt them that quickly. Our best quantum computers have tried for centuries." "Sometimes," Aiden interrupted, "the old ways work best." He gestured to where Zhang was already beginning to map patterns and establish linguistic connections. "Human brains are particularly good at recognizing patterns. It's one of those primitive traits you all love to mock." The next few hours were a blur of activity as more crystals were carefully extracted and analyzed. With each new discovery, the alien observers grew increasingly agitated. Aiden could understand why. Everything they were finding contradicted the established timeline of galactic civilization. The tension finally boiled over when Zhang announced her first successful translation of a complete data sequence. "This can't be correct," she said, double-checking her readings. "According to this, these ruins aren't just pre-council, they're pre-everything, and the beings who built them." She looked up at Aiden, her face pale. "They were like us, humanoid, biological, nothing like the advanced species that evolved later." The alien observers erupted in a cacophony of protests and demands. Le Mans cloud became so agitated it briefly destabilized, while the Valxian representative's bioluminescence reached frequencies that threatened to overload the team's sensors. Aiden held up his hands for silence. "Ladies, gentlemen, and quantum probability matrices, I suggest we all take a breath, those of us who breathe, anyway. Clearly, we've stumbled onto something significant here. The question is, are you going to help us understand it, or are you going to continue insisting it's impossible?" The observers exchanged what passed for glances among their species. Finally, Le Mans spoke. "The Council must be informed immediately." "Of course," Aiden agreed pleasantly. "But first, let's see what else these crystals have to tell us. After all, we're just getting started." As the team returned to work, Aiden caught Professor Zhang's eye and nodded slightly. They both knew this was just the beginning. Somewhere in these crystals lay answers that would shake the foundations of galactic society and humanity's place in it. 2 weeks of non-stop translation work had transformed the expedition's base camp into a maze of holographic displays, each showing cascading streams of decoded data. Professor Zhang hadn't slept in 36 hours, her eyes fixed on the latest crystal's output while 3 different alien species hovered anxiously around her workstation. "This makes no sense," she muttered, rubbing her temples. "According to these records, the ancient civilization's technology was primitive by our standards. They hadn't even achieved controlled fusion when they built these archives." Le Mans' probability cloud twisted in confusion. "Impossible. The energy signatures alone suggest—" "The energy signatures," Aiden interrupted, walking in with fresh coffee, "come from the crystals themselves. They're not records of their technology. They're the product of desperation." He handed Zhang the coffee and brought up a new holographic display. "Look at the progression. These beings knew they were dying out. They put everything they had into creating these storage devices, not because they were advanced, but because they were afraid of being forgotten." The Valxian observer's bioluminescence flickered rapidly. But their construction techniques, their understanding of psychoreactive materials, were gifts, Zhang finished, her eyes widening as new translations appeared. "Holy shit! Aiden, look at this sequence!" The display showed what appeared to be a historical record, but unlike anything they'd expected. The ancient beings had encountered another race, visitors from beyond their world. These visitors had given them certain technologies, including the data crystals, but had refused to share their most advanced knowledge. They were researching genetic modification, Aiden read, his voice growing harder with each word. Not to advance themselves, but to ensure compliance in future generations. These crystals weren't just data storage, they were a warning. The alien observers crowded closer, their various sensory organs trained on the displays. The translations painted a disturbing picture, a civilization that had been deliberately engineered toward what the visitors considered a more stable form, more enlightened, more like themselves. "The regression was intentional," Zhang whispered. "They were made to forget their own nature, to become more abstract, more divorced from their biological origins." Le Mans' cloud had contracted to its smallest possible size, a sign of extreme distress. "You cannot possibly be suggesting that the council races are the end result," Aiden finished. "The descendants of beings who were forcibly evolved away from their original forms. That's exactly what we're suggesting. These weren't just any humanoids, they were your ancestors." The revelation hit the observation team like a physical blow. The Valxian's bioluminescence went completely dark for several seconds. The crystalline Zith representative actually developed stress fractures. "But we are superior," the Zith insisted, their voice resonating with uncertainty. "Our mastery of quantum mechanics, our understanding of the universe's fundamental forces, are all built on principles these beings were forced to accept," Zhang said quietly. "Look at their original research, their natural development path. They were following a completely different line of scientific inquiry, one that matches humanity's current trajectory almost exactly." Aiden brought up another display, this one showing parallel technological developments. They were like us, creative, messy, biological. They approached problems from multiple angles, not just the ones their visitors approved of, and when they realized what was being done to them, they built these archives as a message to anyone who might still think like they did. A message to humanity, Lemon concluded, their cloud expanding with sudden understanding. That is why the crystals respond to your brainwave patterns. You think as they did. Before they were changed, Zhang agreed, before they were made to forget their own nature and embrace what their benefactors considered a superior form of existence. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. Humanity hadn't qualified for advanced status in the Council's eyes because they were too primitive. They hadn't qualified because they were too much like what the Council races used to be, before they were engineered into their current forms. The Council must be informed, the Zith representative said finally, their crystalline form vibrating with suppressed emotion. Oh, they'll be informed, Aiden agreed, gathering the most damning translations into a single data package. But first, I have a question for all of you. Now that you know the truth, now that you understand what was taken from your ancestors, what are you going to do about it? The observers exchanged what passed for glances among their varied species. For the first time since the expedition began, Aiden saw something like uncertainty, and perhaps a hint of their original nature, in their reactions. The truth was out. The only question now was how the Council would handle it. Somehow, Aiden doubted they'd be laughing at humanity's primitive ways during the next session. The emergency council session convened amid a storm of rumors and speculation. The great crystalline chamber was packed beyond capacity, with representatives from every member species crowding the platforms. Even the usually aloof quantum collective had manifested in unprecedented numbers, their probability clouds creating a shifting aurora above the proceedings. Aiden stood at the center of it all, surrounded by holographic displays showing the translated data. Ambassador Wong remained beside him, his diplomatic calm a stark contrast to the chaos swirling around them. Order! High Councillor Zixvak's chromatophores flashed warning patterns. The Council will have order. Gradually the chamber quieted, though tension crackled through the air like static electricity. The Zeth representatives were vibrating at frequencies that threatened to shatter their crystalline forms. The Valxians' bioluminescent displays had become so erratic that several species had to adjust their optical sensors. Dr. Chen, Zixvak's translator, conveyed careful neutrality. You claim to have made discoveries that challenge our understanding of galactic history. The Council will hear your evidence. Aiden activated the main display. Ancient scripts filled the air alongside their translations. What we found on XO 3379 wasn't just a historical record. It was a message deliberately preserved for species like humanity, species that still think like your ancestors once did. The chamber erupted in denials and protests. A Zith representative's voice cut through the chaos, their crystalline form resonating with anger. Preposterous! Our species evolved naturally to our current superior forms. Did you? Aiden brought up another display. These genetic markers suggest otherwise. Your ancestors were humanoid like us. They were deliberately modified generation by generation to become what you are now. Everything you consider natural about your current forms was engineered. By whom? Demanded Representative Catil of the Quantum Collective. We're still working on that, Ambassador Wong interjected smoothly. The records suggest an advanced species, possibly from another galaxy, conducted these modifications over thousands of years. They believed they were helping your ancestors achieve a more enlightened state of being. Lies. The Valxian delegation's chief scientist pulsed with agitation. Our biological superiority is well documented. Our mastery of quantum mechanics, our understanding of higher dimensional physics, all follows exactly one path of development, Aiden interrupted. Haven't you ever wondered why every council race, despite your different origins, developed nearly identical technological approaches? Why you all abandoned certain lines of research in favor of others? He brought up a new display showing parallel development paths. Your ancestors were guided, some might say forced down specific technological and evolutionary paths. Alternative approaches were systematically discouraged or eliminated. The beings you became were designed, not evolved. The chamber fell silent as the evidence mounted. Historical records, genetic markers, technological progression charts, all pointing to an uncomfortable truth. The council races hadn't achieved their current forms through natural evolution or superior intellect. They were the products of ancient genetic engineering. High Councillor Zixavak's chromatophores had gone almost completely dark, a sign of deep distress. Even if what you say is true, what purpose would such modifications serve? Control, Ambassador Wong said quietly. A species that engineered itself away from its biological origins would be more predictable, more manageable. Your ancestors' creative chaos was replaced with ordered progression along predetermined paths. That's why you can't understand our approach to science, Aiden added. Why our primitive methods sometimes achieve results your superior techniques miss. We still think like your ancestors did, following multiple paths, embracing chaos and contradiction, learning through trial and error. The quantum collective's representatives had begun to destabilize, their probability clouds flickering erratically. This is unacceptable. The political implications alone are exactly why we're presenting this evidence to the full council, Ambassador Wong interrupted. Your people deserve to know the truth about their origins, about what was taken from them. And what do you expect us to do with this truth? Asked a Zith elder, their crystalline form showing signs of stress fractures. Return to our primitive states? Abandon millennia of progress? Not at all, Aiden replied, but perhaps it's time to consider that there might be more than one path to advancement. That humanity's approach, while different from yours, isn't inferior, just as your ancestors' methods weren't inferior to their benefactors. The chamber erupted in heated debate. Some delegates demanded immediate classification of all findings. Others called for further investigation. A few, particularly among the younger representatives, showed signs of genuine curiosity about their species' origins. High Councillor Zixavak raised all four appendages for silence. These revelations require consideration. The Council will recess to discuss. With respect, High Councillor, Ambassador Wong interjected, this information has already been transmitted to every major academic institution on Earth. The time for closed-door discussions is past. The question now is, how will the Council address this new reality? The chamber fell silent again as the implications sank in. The carefully maintained hierarchy of galactic civilization had just been upended. The supposedly primitive humans had uncovered truths that changed everything, and there was no going back. Aiden watched the alien representatives struggling with their new reality and felt a mix of sympathy and satisfaction. The truth was often uncomfortable, but facing it was the first step toward real progress. The question was, were the council races ready to confront their own past? Professor Zhang's holographic laboratory had become a nexus of frenetic activity. Multiple translation streams ran simultaneously across the walls, each revealing new layers of the ancient civilization's knowledge. Representatives from various council races now worked alongside the human team, their earlier condescension replaced by growing amazement. Look at this, Zhang pointed to a particular data stream, her eyes bright with excitement despite her exhaustion. Their understanding of particle physics wasn't just different from current council doctrine, it was fundamentally more advanced in certain areas. Le Mon's probability cloud extended sensory tendrils toward the display. These equations, they mirror your species' current theoretical models. Exactly, Aiden said, bringing up comparative analyses. What you call our primitive approach to quantum mechanics. It's actually closer to your ancestors' original work, before they were forced to abandon it in favor of their benefactors' methods. The laboratory's displays showed parallel developments across multiple scientific disciplines. The ancient civilization had pursued research paths that modern council races had long ago dismissed as dead ends, yet these supposedly inferior approaches had yielded results that even current technology couldn't replicate. A Zith scientist, their crystalline form vibrating with intellectual excitement, examined another data stream. These power generation theories, they're remarkably similar to your nuclear fusion approaches, but the efficiency ratings are beyond anything we thought possible. Because you were taught to think about energy in purely quantum terms, Zhang explained. Your ancestors understood that there were multiple valid approaches. They were working on hybrid systems that combined various physical principles. The evidence was becoming impossible to ignore. Page after page of translated data showed that the ancient humanoids had developed scientific principles that humanity was only now rediscovering. More importantly, they had done so without the quantum-based technologies that their descendants now relied upon exclusively. "Here's where it gets interesting," Aiden said, pulling up genetic data. "Watch the progression." The display showed generation-by-generation changes in the ancient species' genetic code. Subtle modifications appeared with each new generation, alterations so slight they would have seemed natural at the time, but when viewed as a complete sequence, the pattern became clear. The changes were introduced through engineered environmental factors, Zhang explained. Radiation levels, chemical compounds in food and water, even atmospheric composition, all carefully manipulated to guide evolution in specific directions. A Valxian researcher's bioluminescence flickered rapidly, their equivalent of rapid blinking. These modifications, they're not just physical. They affected cognitive patterns, neural development. They literally changed how your ancestors thought, Aiden confirmed. Generation by generation, they were pushed away from creative, multidisciplinary approaches toward more specialized, linear thinking patterns. The laboratory fell silent as the implications sank in. The council races hadn't achieved their current forms through natural evolution or superior intelligence. They were the products of careful engineering, designed to think and develop along predetermined paths. But why? The Zith scientist's voice resonated with distress. Why would anyone do this to an entire civilization? Zhang brought up another set of translations. According to these records, your ancestors' benefactors believed they were helping. They saw biological evolution as messy, inefficient. They thought they were guiding you toward a more perfect state of being. Perfect according to their standards, Aiden added. They couldn't understand why your ancestors explored multiple solutions to the same problem, why they combined different approaches instead of focusing on the optimal path, so they fixed it. The data streams continued to flow, revealing more details about the ancient civilization's achievements. They had developed clean energy systems that combined principles modern science considered mutually exclusive. Their medical technologies had integrated biological and quantum approaches in ways the council races had long ago abandoned. Look at these neural interface designs, Zhang pointed out. They're almost identical to prototype systems we're developing on Earth, systems your experts dismissed as too crude to work. Le Mans Cloud contracted thoughtfully. Because we were taught that only pure quantum interfaces were viable, but these records suggest that the best solutions often lie in combining approaches, Aiden finished, something your ancestors understood before it was engineered out of them. The laboratory's displays kept revealing new connections. The ancient civilization had developed technologies that bridged multiple scientific disciplines. They had created hybrid systems that defied current theoretical models, and most importantly, they had done it all while maintaining their biological nature, before they were uplifted into their current forms. There's more, Zhang said quietly, bringing up one final data stream. They left instructions, ways to potentially reverse the changes, to recover lost cognitive patterns. The alien researchers reacted with a mixture of shock and fascination. The possibility of reclaiming their species' original nature while retaining their current advancement was both terrifying and enticing. That's why these records responded to human neural patterns, Aiden explained. Your ancestors knew that someday, a species that still thought like they did might find this place. They left us everything we need to help you remember who you used to be. The implications were staggering. Humanity hadn't just discovered the truth about the council race's past. They had found a potential key to their future. The question was, would the council accept this knowledge, or would they reject it in favor of maintaining their carefully constructed view of reality? As if in answer, more alien scientists began arriving at the laboratory, drawn by the growing evidence that everything they thought they knew about their own history might be wrong. The tide of truth, once started, was becoming impossible to stop. The final emergency session of the Galactic Council felt different. Gone was the usual pomp and ceremony. The crystalline chamber's natural acoustics carried whispers of heated debates as species that had once looked down on humanity now faced their own forgotten past. High Councillor Zixavak's chromatophores displayed complex patterns of uncertainty as Aiden and Professor Zhang presented their final report. The complete translations filled the chamber's holographic space, impossible to ignore or dismiss. The evidence is conclusive, Zhang stated, her voice steady. Not only were your ancestors more like us than you previously believed, but they actively tried to preserve their knowledge for species that still thought as they once did. "And what would you have us do with this knowledge?" demanded a senior quantum collective representative, their probability cloud roiling with agitation. "Abandon millennia of progress? Return to primitive biological forms?" Aiden stepped forward. "Actually, we propose something far more interesting," he gestured, and new holographic displays materialized. "Your ancestors didn't just leave warnings, they left blueprints, ways to integrate their original approaches with your current technologies." The chamber erupted in a chaos of colors, lights, and quantum fluctuations as various species reacted to this revelation. Some reacted with horror, others with undisguised curiosity. "Impossible," declared a Zith elder, their crystalline form vibrating with denial. "Our current forms are superior. Our technological path is—" "Predetermined," Ambassador Wong interrupted smoothly, "engineered. But what if you could have both? The advancement you've achieved and the creative potential you lost." Zhang brought up comparative diagrams. "We've already begun successful integrations of your quantum technology with our primitive approaches. The results exceed anything either of our civilizations achieved separately." The displays showed hybrid systems that combined council quantum mechanics with human particle physics, energy outputs that defied current theoretical models, medical techniques that bridged the gap between biological and quantum existence. "This is why humanity's primitive fusion reactors work differently than expected," Aiden explained. "We're not trying to copy your methods, we're rediscovering your ancestors' original principles, and in some cases, improving upon them." A younger Valxian scientist's bioluminescence pulsed with excitement. "The efficiency ratings, they're beyond anything in our current models." "Because you're not limited by single-path thinking anymore," Zhang said. "Your ancestors understood that the best solutions often combine multiple approaches. That's what was engineered out of your species, the ability to see beyond the approved methods." High Councillor Zixavac raised all appendages for silence. "You propose to teach us, you, whom we considered primitive." "We propose to help you remember," Aiden corrected. "Everything we've learned, everything we're discovering, it's all built on foundations your ancestors laid. We're not your superiors. We're the custodians of knowledge they wanted you to reclaim." The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. Humanity wasn't asking for admission to the Council's hierarchy. They were offering something far more valuable, a bridge between what the Council races had become and what they used to be. "The choice, of course, is yours," Ambassador Wong said into the silence. "Earth is willing to establish joint research initiatives to share our primitive insights, to help integrate the old knowledge with the new, but only if you're ready to accept that different doesn't mean inferior." The Council races began to debate among themselves, but this time the tone was different. The younger representatives especially showed keen interest in human methods, in rediscovering their species' lost potential. Finally, High Councillor Zixavac spoke, chromatophores displaying a pattern none of the humans had seen before. Perhaps we have been blind to our own limitations. The Council accepts your proposal." "With conditions," added Catil of the Quantum Collective. "Any integration of old knowledge must be carefully monitored, controlled." "With respect," Aiden interrupted, allowing himself a small smile. "That kind of controlled linear thinking is exactly what got your ancestors into this situation. Maybe it's time to embrace a little chaos." To everyone's surprise, a ripple of what could only be described as laughter passed through the chamber. The Council races were beginning to remember, however faintly, what it felt like to think beyond their engineered constraints. "Welcome to the future," Aiden said, looking around at the assembled representatives. "It's going to be a lot messier than you're used to, but trust me, that's a good thing." As the session concluded and new research protocols were established, Aiden caught Professor Zhang's eye. They both knew this was just the beginning. Humanity had done more than prove their worth to the Council. They had helped an entire civilization begin to rediscover its true nature. The age of rigid hierarchy was over. The era of collaboration, of combining the best of all approaches, was about to begin. And somewhere, Aiden liked to think, the ancient beings who had left those crystals were smiling.